Hi, everyone, and happy Thursday. Welcome to Get Paid. I can never get this right. Get Paid. And the profitable advantage of inclusive diversity.
Yeah.
And, we hadn't really given that title in a while, but I just wanted to reiterate that it is the profitable advantage of inclusive diversity and profitable for businesses, but profitable for us as humans in having a fuller life and a more fulfilled life, in making sure that we are considering everyone around us. So this week, we are continuing our conversation about privilege. And so last week, we talked about privilege, and we talked about it at a very high level, and how you can use your privilege for good. And so I said, hey, there is a quiz out there that I use in my presentations, and we talk about almost 70 different forms of privilege, right? And so you're like, what, 70 different forms of privilege? What could that be? Because everyone, their ears perk up when they hear privilege and they automatically go to white privilege. But there are so many other forms of privilege that go unnoticed that we don't even know about, right? So some of them are, I'm just going to give a few examples. My kitchen is stocked with food. I can afford a pet for fun, right? I have access to the internet. I have dental insurance, right? I have a bed that I can sleep in by myself. I have a house. My refrigerator has food. Like some of those privileges we don't even think about. And so, Deb, you and I took the quiz, right?
We did. Mm-hmm.
What did you get?
85%.
Okay, so Deb got 85. I took the quiz. I got 92%. So we just dispelled some rumors and myths that white people are more privileged than black people, and that black people are always less privileged than white people, right? A myth. Nothing is absolute in life. And yet we live in this society where we like to take this big brush and make broad assumptions. And we set policy on some of those broad assumptions. Everything that's going on in DC, a lot of it is based on broad assumptions of extremes. And so as we discussed our results, Deb, you had a really great point.
Yeah, what was interesting to me, because I took the quiz. You've been using this quiz, but I took it for the first time. I looked at it earlier this week, and then we looked at it again today. And first of all, the broadness of it was really interesting to me, because there are a lot of those things where I was like, wow, that's true. I have this and I don't think about it. And I think what the quiz showed me was that there is such a broad swath of things that create privilege for people. What I also thought about was the fact that I may have a lower score. I may be less privileged based on that quiz than you are, but there are certain elements of privilege that are not changeable, and that we just come to the party with at birth. And that could be gender, it could be race, and I'm sure there are some others that you don't do things for and aren't able to change. So as the fact that you came out at a higher privilege, it's true. You have more of those privileges than I do, but some of them may weigh heavier in certain situations. And I think that's where we come into the whole issue of race, and something that I can't change and you can't change. And how does that factor in, even if you are more privileged in general?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you can look at statistics. When you look at the average high school graduate white male makes more than the average college educated black male, right? So if you look at that and you think, well, if they went to college, they should make more. Yeah. So what's different? Okay. Right. And you're looking at it from race. You and I talked about last week how we could show up for the same job with the same experience, and twice the amount of times we do that, you're going to get called back for the interview and I'm not, right? Once we've had the first interview and people understand our race differences. As a recruiter and in the work I do, I know that you often, and I know I often hear, well, yes, I do want to have a diverse pool of talent. However, I want the best talent, right? And so privilege doesn't always give you the advantage of best in most cases. However, when we look at race, because of America being who it is, that is where the advantage comes in, and we can't do anything about that. Because to your point, and for anyone out there who has taken the quiz, I would say most of these areas of privilege can change.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right. If you look at these areas of privilege and apply it to when you were a child, when you were, a young adult, who you are now, they've probably changed.
Or they're circumstantial in some cases, right?
Correct. Right. They're circumstantial. However, how I was born and how you were born, you can never change. And so as you change your privilege, there are elements of privilege that can't be changed that affect you in a big way. Right. And that's what we talk about every week, is if you have that privilege, which is a lack of barrier or no hurdles because of something you have had nothing to do with, then it is your opportunity to use that privilege for good.
Yes. Yes. And not to be defensive about it, which is what we talked about last week. Like, it's not a personal thing, as we've said, it just is. And in some cases, a lot of those privileges on that list are things that, listen, my refrigerator has always been full. I've gone through different periods when I was younger, we didn't have lots of money, but our refrigerator was always full. So it isn't something that I think about, but it's not a personal thing. Any kind of privilege, whether it's my white privilege or, your pantry privilege or whatever those things are, we just don't get defensive about it. Just acknowledge it. And then, to your point in our discussion last week, figure out how you can use what you have, whatever that is, whoever you are, to help somebody else who doesn't have that same privilege. Help lift the barrier away. That's all.
Right. And so we were also talking about the situation that happened in Short Hills Mall this week, right? It's taken over TikTok and social media, and I'm getting calls about it constantly, partly because I live down the street from Short Hills Mall. The other part is just because, as a woman of color, it's something that's front of mind. And there was a situation between a white woman and a black woman. There was some sort of disagreement in a store, and the white woman physically went for the black woman. Fearing for her safety, she used her phone to videotape the altercations. And they went on for some time, with the white woman, crumbling to the floor in tears 1 minute, next minute being very angry and chasing the black woman around the store. It was all caught on film, and a few things happened. The first thing, when the media got hold of the video, they didn't show the whole video. They only showed the white woman on the floor. So that created quite a narrative, right?
Like,
it created
context, right?
Right. It created a narrative that, oh, look at this black woman who's recording this poor white woman on the floor while she's having a mental breakdown. There was no medical professional there to say she had a mental breakdown. Who knows what was going on in her head, right? I'm not going to give my commentary because I definitely have an opinion. But she was recorded, and media said, oh, poor white woman. Okay, so that was a privilege, right? That was an advantage that she had, because in America, white woman is always considered innocent. And oh my goodness, she's a victim. And she's crying. Good goodness, right? Those white women tears. Okay. But then when it all came out and you could see who was actually the victim, which was the black woman who was recording what the actor was doing to her. When the police came, when the police and security came, they did what the Black woman assumed they were going to do. They took care of the white woman, and they wanted the Black woman to leave the situation, and didn't care for her. And so as we talk about that situation and so many others that are like it, we always talk about the white woman and her frailty and her mental state, but there's never a consideration. And I hate to use that absolute term, but very, very seldom is there a consideration for the Black woman or the woman of color's mental state, mental health, safety. Mm-hmm. And so that's where this uneven privilege that we have nothing to do with comes into play. And it happens in corporations, it happens in restaurants, it happens in homes, it happens everywhere. And that's the work of the work, to get people to understand that it should be about humanity. However, it isn't that simple, because we live in a race consumed
bias, right?
Right?
I mean, assumptions, what the assumptions are. The first assumptions are typically going to be the white woman was the victim. Like, that's just the world we live in right now. It may not happen every time, but it happens probably most of the time.
And how many times have we seen that actually she wasn't the victim? Like, we could go back for so long, but like, front of mind to me, I think of, like, what was her name? Susan Smith, who drowned her kids and then blamed it on two made up Black men. Right. And they were like, oh, this poor woman lost her children. And right. And so then you have the woman in Central Park, mm-hmm. right, who feigned that the bird watcher, Harvard educated bird watcher. Here's another situation, privilege. His education was, he went to Harvard. I don't know where she went to school, but it wasn't Harvard. Right. I don't think it was Ivy League. But on paper, he would have the privilege. But in reality, that meant nothing, because she called the police on him and feigned that she was in danger. And that's what happened earlier this week. The white woman feigned that the Black woman was attacking her by filming her.
And in Central Park, that woman used her privilege as a weapon. I mean, because who knows what would have happened to him had the wrong cop or wrong safety person come and made other assumptions, because we've seen that happen too. So she literally took her privilege and used it as a weapon against him. And his only weapon against her was to try to film it, to at least have it documented. And sometimes, I mean, you think about the attack on the Capitol, sometimes having those documentation doesn't even help, but at least it was what he thought he could do to protect himself. But she really just took it to a whole other level by calling 911 and feigning that she was being attacked. I mean, I just found that so egregious.
Well, and that's what happened earlier this week. So we don't have these conversations to further divide. We have these conversations to bring to your attention the inequities that are out there, mm-hmm. that you need to use your intelligence, your privilege, your influence to work to overcome, because it's made up, right? These things are made up so that we are divided, but you have to know about them to be able to do something to change the trajectory, right? And so if you go through life and you think, oh no, we're just humans, none of this exists, then you get in a situation like what we've just talked about. We just gave 3 examples, and you're like, oh, well, it's not about that. So we don't address that, but it's absolutely about that.
Yeah.
So Deb, what's the bottom line?
So I think the takeaway for all of this is, first of all, there are broad privileges out there. Absolutely. And I think it's important, like that quiz is eye-opening in a lot of ways. And I think for all of us, we should take it and just be aware. The second thing is, once you are aware of your privileges, whatever they are, don't be defensive about them. Don't think that you have to defend yourself and get angry about them. Accept them for what they are and think about, is there a way that I can use my privilege, whatever it is, to help other people and to raise, take away some of the barriers that other people might face, whatever those might be. And then also to be aware that certain privileges are harder to overcome because they can't be changed and circumstances will not change them. And those are the ones that are particularly important that we're aware of and that we work together to try to remove some of the biases that exist. So that would be my bottom line.
Well, I appreciate that. I would just add that if you're in that situation, consider both sides and understand that in society and in history, women of color have been the least protected group of humans ever. And understand that.
Yeah.
So I appreciate this week. I think this discussion was really important, and I just appreciate the time that we've spent having this conversation. And I hope that more of you are having conversations in safe spaces so that you can then take what you've learned from those conversations and put them into action. So Thanks for joining us this week. And we look forward to seeing you all next week. Please reach out if you have any questions or let us know what your score was. The quiz is in the commentary. And I'd love to hear what your score is. And let's continue this conversation. So thanks for joining us. And we will see you next week.
See you
Take
next
care.
Week. Bye, everyone. Bye.